Hello, good evening and welcome to the program. This is Daily Politics, live on Trust TV. This is, of course, your go-to, most trusted political discourse platform in Nigeria. My name is Abdullahi Ahmed. We'll begin the program with an update on news making the rounds. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has appointed Mr. Adeola Oluwatosin Ajayi as the new Director General of the State Security Service, the self-styled Department of State Services. He replaces Yusuf Magajibichi, an appointee of former President Muhammadu Buhari. A statement issued by Ajurin Gilali, the Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, which announced this on Monday, says Ambassador Muhammad has been appointed as the new Director General of the National Intelligence Agency. State governments have rejected the federal government's move to save additional revenue for the payment of new minimum wage. The decision affected the revenue distribution between the three tiers of government from the Federation Committee. Update on statutory allocation shows that the government transferred a sum of 200 billion naira into the non-savings account at the August FARC meeting, making a total of 595 billion naira. The Commissioners of Finance, Akwa Ibom, Dr. Linus Noah, Delta State, Akemo Tileje, and Ekiti State, Akintunde Oyebode, raised the observation at the last FARC meeting held on August 16, 2024, as reported by the Punch newspaper. At the meeting, it was learned that the committee distributed a total sum of 1.36 trillion naira to the three tiers of government, which is 1 billion naira less than the 1.35 trillion naira shared in June. Now let's dive into today's big issue. Since 2019, over 22,500 Nigerians have been caught with fake certificates from unaccredited universities in Benin Republic and Togo, according to the Federal Minister of Education. The minister, Professor Tahir Mamman, revealed that more than 21,600 of these bogus degrees were obtained from Benin Republic, with another 1,105 coming from Togo. In response, the federal government, through the Minister of Education, has officially invalidated these fake certificates and is now cracking down on workers in both public and private sectors who use them to secure jobs. For more on the government's measures to combat the spread of substandard degrees, let's hear from the Minister, Tahir Mamman.
We cannot have in our midst people who procure certificates, fake certificates, and come to compete with our students graduated from universities and polytechnics through their sweat. Some spending 4, 5, 6 or more years. A lot of them didn't even bother going for NYSC. The number may be more, because a lot of them didn't bother going for attempt to go for NYSC. And some who attempted could not succeed in the screening process. So they just disappeared into the thin air. So in the final analysis, what the federal government approved is that any person, the central government will issue a circular to all employers, whether it is public or private, to fish out anybody with certificate from these institutions. That circular probably would have been out and sent to the head of service is mandated to fish out in the public service, in the civil service, anybody who is parading certificate from all these institutions. So this is the decision of the federal government on this matter.
Right, the Minister of Education there, Professor Tahir Mamman, addressing journalists at a press conference, shedding light on the government's probe into the spread of fake degrees from Benin Republic and Togo into Nigeria. Now, this, of course, investigation was sparked by a groundbreaking report from Daily Nigeria's investigative journalist Umar Audu, who went undercover and acquired a degree from a Benin Republic university in under 2 months. Remarkably, he even deployed for his National Youth Service which is usually what you have to do after completing your degree or higher national diploma using that fake certificate. Well, to help us provide some context and analyze the federal government's latest measures, including the invalidation of these fake degrees, we're joined virtually by the undercover journalist himself, Umar Audu, who is joining us via Zoom to add value to the conversation. Umar, it's good to see you again. Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us on Daily Politics. Do we have Umar on the line? Hello, Umar. All right, we're going to work on the technicality there to get the audio working so we can have a conversation with Umar. But join us in the studio is another Umar, a different Umar actually. Dr. Umar Bindir is a former lecturer at the University of Maiduguri, a former secretary to the Adamawa State government, and former director and chief executive officer of NOTAP, and most recently the immediate past national coordinator of the National Social Investment Program, which is now the National Social Investment Agency. Dr. Bindir, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Good evening. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Right. First of all, your reaction to this development. For a lot of people, a step in the right direction. What do you make of it?
I think this is fantastic, especially when it is backed by a journalist who went undercover to go to these universities and in under 3 months gets a degree, and then the big deal is actually coming to join the National Youth Service Corps. Therefore, the check-in has to also be done here. But this is fantastic, but it's very, very unfair for people to go to fake universities or fake institutions, collect certificates at degree level, sometimes at postgraduate level, and then come to this country and then fake themselves through our system. So kudos to the minister and kudos to Mr. President for have approved this strategy.
But in talking about this course of action, do we have the capacity to vet the personnel data in both the public and private sector to purge the system of anyone who holds that degree that has now been invalidated by the government?
Well, you know, the National University Commission, NUC, has this publication every month, right? That they publish genuine universities in Nigeria, federal government universities, state government universities, and then privately owned universities that are genuine. And after those 3 lists, they now have questionable universities, and they warn the public, both public and private, from employers, from whatever, that these are yet to be accredited for awarding degrees, institutions. Then they have another list saying that don't get degrees from these institutions, even if they give you an ambition, and so on and so forth. So it's an extension to that. And I think...
But these are domestic institutions that we own and run.
Even outside the country. They have list of universities out of the country too, some even up to Australia.
You're saying the NUC has a blacklist of international universities and institutions?
Local and international, right. Yes. Every month that publication is actually distributed in the country. So, you see, it's a gradual process. Having data and validation process. It's a gradual process, but it's good to see that the Honorable Minister announcing this possibly for the very first time, to see a convinced the senior government official getting approval from his boss that after observing this, Your Excellency, we need to purge the system so that our system will be credible, our certificates will be credible, our employees will be credible. We cannot allow this very watery system to be spoiling the image of Nigeria. So I think even if they had no data, now with this development, I think gradually we will build our evidence systems to have data that is credible.
Right. Okay, we'll circle back to what the government makes of those degrees, whether they are substandard or not good enough for Nigeria's system. But let's also take a quick look at some of those universities or institutions that have been highlighted as captured by that presser given by the Minister of Education, Professor Tahir Mamman. These are some of the institutions that the federal government has approved as institutions. So if you get your degrees from these institutions, you're not going to have any problem going forward. And they're there, just to itemize a few of them. And in Togo also. So these are the only three that if you're thinking about going to, study in a university or any other tertiary institution, for instance, in Togo, these are the only three that are acceptable here in Nigeria. So anything outside of these three, obviously, is not going to be acceptable. What does this say about the metric we're using to judge standardization? Because that in itself, you could go to the United Kingdom, for instance, in any other part of the Western world, and your degrees here in Nigeria are looked as subpar, as substandard. Is this fair on these institutions from Benin Republic, from Togo, for instance? Are we certain that they are below par, or is this just scapegoating universities and institutions just so we could appear to be doing something to correct the gaps within the system?
Well, that's not the impression I get. The impression I get is that we have a National University Commission that accredits not just courses in universities, but also the establishment of a university. And the standard of the NUC is an international standard. So they have their own colleague establishments in other countries that they compare notes. So it's not true that when Nigerian degrees goes out to America or to the UK, they are looked down upon. But in fact, it's the other way around. Institutions in developed countries are looking for Nigerian degrees, particularly from some of the top universities that we have, first generation and second generation universities. And that is why, particularly when you go to the US and also the UK, you see Nigerians actually flying to the highest level of performance very, very quickly. Why? Because they are well prepared. But certainly the comparative data analysis of institutions like NUC brings out all these fake universities. Why? Because they are there. In many of these countries, Nigerians are also the people
What makes these universities, Doctor, fake in your view? What makes them fake?
Well, first of all, they are not regulated very well in their country. They are established, they are ramshackle, they don't have campuses, they don't have facilities to teach, they don't have good teachers, and they know all the indices that you can actually deploy to standardize a university. The only thing they just have a name. This is a university, and they are degree awarding. There are even universities that give you PhDs, and they are actually substandard. There's no way you can go to a university and say in less than 2 years you have a PhD, and they will give you even gown. They will even convocate you. Some of these universities.
But isn't that the same thing when I talk about institutions or employers of labor in other parts of the world? Granted, not all of them, but some of them, they make even Nigerian graduates with degrees and masters take IELTS test,
yes,
which is basically to confirm that you understand English,
yes,
in its written and spoken form.
Yes.
And for so many years, Nigerians take this as an insult because our education system basically is in English. And well, they disagree. They don't think that our standard is acceptable, and that's why they put this stopgap measure to really, again, test whether future applicants actually understand how to communicate in English. How is this any different from what we're doing with Benin Republic and Togo?
Well, this is just
that
language.
They could disagree and say, listen, we don't think our universities are subpar or below standard. You just are trying to give a dog a bad name just so you can hang it.
You see, that's not what has happened here. Those countries, both Benin and Togo, were even the countries that are giving Nigeria information to say that, look, you keep recognizing degrees from these institutions that are not standard in our country. You better check your system and don't allow this. They are spoiling our name, they are wasting our time, and so on and so forth. So it's not like Nigeria just woke up and took a list to say that, no, we don't like this country, and no, that's not what is happening. The countries themselves are comparing notes with Nigeria. On the other side, to do with TOEFL and so on and so forth, the English testing, they do that to Germans, they do that to Japanese, they do that to Chinese. This is just...
Germans speak Dutch.
Well, but there are many that actually go to English-speaking universities. And for those that are purely different language, they make you pass through a 1 year or 2 years. It's like a Nigerian wanting to study in China. The first 1 or 2 years is actually to learn Chinese. And if it is only when you pass that up to communication level before they admit you into the university.
But I'm talking about a country that colonized this nation of ours, asking students that went through an educational system that they helped set up in English to write an English test again.
Well, I don't think America has colonized Nigeria.
No, I mean, I'm talking about the United Kingdom,
in the United Kingdom, there are very, very few, if any, that actually deploys English testing on Nigerian students before admission. I schooled there. I've never faced any testing of my English. I think our English is perfect.
So you would say Oxford, Harvard, Cambridge, all these universities, they see our degrees.
Oxford and Cambridge, they know the University of Benin, they know University of Lagos, they know University of the Maiduguri, they know University of Abu, and they know all these standard universities. And I don't think Oxford has taken anybody through English just to make you and to accredit you based on speaking English. There are some, if you're an engineer and you go with your engineering degree and they see the content of the coursework, they may recommend that you do 1 year course with their first year course, and then you continue because they can see they can see the gaps. But that is true. You know, but professional, even medicine, sometimes they make you take some few courses over 1 year, and then you polish up, and then you join the rest. This is to your advantage, to make sure that you are not actually disadvantaged.
Right. Let's speak to the man that actually led to the falling of the first domino that triggered this tsunami of a development. Umar Audu is back to speak to us on this development, the man that started it all. Umar, I hope you can hear me. Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us on the program.
Yeah, good evening, and thank you for having me.
Right. I suppose let's just start with your reaction first. Did you feel happy hearing the minister make those pronouncements about the government's position going forward?
Of course, for me, it's a proud moment, and for me and my organization, because if you're talking about impact, every journalist wants to see his work having an impact. And I can see that if you want to rate my investigation, I know you rate it very, very high in terms of impact. So I really feel excited when I heard those policy announcements by the Honorable Minister of Education in person of Professor Tahir Mamman. And I must commend him most sincerely for having this courage and will to come up with this policy that will sanitize our education. Go to him alone. I must also commend members of the interministerial panel set up by the federal government to look into, to investigate my own report. So, and they did a very, very decent job and came up with a solid recommendations. I give credit to them all, and I'm also excited about the policy announcement.
All right, let's talk about the list of universities accredited that the federal government is willing to accept. Are there any names there that you see that perhaps you don't agree with? What do you make of the list? And also, do you think that this is enough to put a stop to this unwholesome practice? Right, that's rather unfortunate. We seem to have lost our connection to Umar there. We're going to work on it and get back to hear his thoughts on this one. He's, of course, the investigative journalist that exposed this degree mills that have given the Nigerian government a run for its money in trying to stop the bleeding and to address some of these loopholes as far as our education system is concerned. And this particular policy announcement going forward by the federal government is supposed to mitigate this unwholesome practice, which has obviously impacted negatively the polity across the country. We're going to work on that connection so we can hear more of Umar's thought about this development. But Dr. Bindir, if you could just respond to the question I was going to ask Umar there. Do you think this is enough to stop the bleeding, to stop the rot within the system, especially given how this culture has pretty much become a part of the norm, so to say? This has been the practice for so many years. Do you see this putting an end to this practice?
I think kudos to the Honorable Minister for coming out very strongly on this, and I hope, just your guess is as good as mine, is the system should consolidate. The system should strengthen itself on this. I think further investigations from where our brother stopped should continue. More liaison with the country's regulatory organizations should actually be undertaken. And whatever references or admission procedures that these countries do, we should be very conscious of them so that we can help Nigeria. But on the other side, I think the Honorable Minister is already doing that. We should ensure that we help people who are qualified to have access to higher education in the country. Expand where possible the quota system so that more people can actually get entry into good universities, both in Nigeria, in Togo, and in Benin Republic. So I think this will continue, and I am sure, knowing Professor Tahir Mamman, the Honorable Minister, for picking this journalistic report and then building it up into a government policy to the point of implementation with announcements, very solid announcements. He's not going to allow this to just actually water down.
Hasn't the damage already been done, especially if we're talking about people in the workforce that we're going to purge? Don't you see that as counterproductive? Haven't they paid enough price already, by perhaps being pointed out in public that these degrees are no longer going to be accepted in Nigeria?
I think we shouldn't water that down to the point of conceding that, oh, you've been punished enough by the removal and so on. If anything, I'm sure many academics and truthfully graduating students would have thought that there should be additional sanctions on. I mean, this is theft. This is a crime, if you know what I mean.
All those 20,000 plus certificates that are being invalidated, all of them got it through dubious means. Do you think the federal government can establish that? Because this could be a lawsuit in the making.
Well, I mean, they have their standards through which they utilize indices to actually qualify you as fake. I mean, you don't just wake up and say, hey, your degree is fake because you've gone to that university. I think the thorough Professor Tahir Mamman and his team, I'm sure, must have done enough work to come out to this level of publicity. Even the countries, one may say, oh, Togo or Benin Republic will come and say, oh, you are sort of like, drooping on us to showcase that our system is very watery. They must have done all their assignments to actually come solid. I don't think diplomatically they will come to this level without consultations and agreements with systems in all the countries.
You think this is fair on victims of the system, the ones that are going to be fished out and be made to look like criminals because they have degrees from these universities that are now banned?
Yeah, I mean, there's no second saying on this. You know how you got admitted into a fake university.
It wasn't a fake university when they were admitted.
No.
It has not been established by anyone.
I mean, the journalist, you had the journalist who went there, got a degree in ridiculous time
let's
period.
not also forget that there was a pushback from the institution that he attended. Said that, listen, and we do have some cases like this here in Nigeria where so many people have gone to the university, maybe they have started, they got expelled, but somehow they managed to forge a certificate and present it, and eventually we understand that They were even given fake admission to begin with. So let's not pretend as if our system is perfect, right? They say that, you know, his reporting was not a true reflection of everything else that has happened. In fact, there were some pushbacks there. But that is not the main focus of the conversation. The focus of the conversation is is this collective punishment fair on those who did all they could, followed the rules in Benin Republic, by the way, to get their degrees?
I don't like this word, follow the rules fairly. I don't want to subscribe to that. If an honorable minister has come on international TV after doing all the due diligence to give numbers and to give sanctions on what needs to be done, I don't think he is going to do a wishy-washy work to come and do this. It must have been a very, very thorough investigation, riding from the journalists that actually went through this, and he must have done his homework with his team. They must have done all the checks and balances to come up to this level. And therefore, for that, especially knowing the personality that is actually doing this, the thoroughness, and this guy is an SAN, for God's sake. He knows the legal implications of things. And he was there, a vice chancellor of a university. So he knows these kind of tricks and so on and so forth. An academic for a very long time, you know. So you don't take that for granted. I think he must have done his job thoroughly, and therefore, whatever he says, from the number, from the universities, from the fakeness, I go with that.
All right. I think we have Umar back, so let's try and double down on that conversation. Good to have you back, Umar. Let's get your reaction to, you know, the position of the federal government on anyone who, from 2018, I believe, that went to some of those listed universities, invalidating their certificates. Do you think that that is a fair outcome in your view?
Of course, I support the decision of the federal government 100%, because this issue has been going on, and most of the people who went ahead to get this kind of degrees, they know the implication, but they never thought a day like this will come. You understand? Nobody thought a day like this will come. So that's why everybody was just going in, rushing to those countries to obtain this fake certificate. So whoever is found guilty of parading a fake certificate, of course, it should be flushed out of the system. I'm in support of the decision 100%, and even the management of Daily Nigerian have also aligned with the position of the federal government. So, and I hear some people expressing their displeasure, saying they spent 3 or 4 years to obtain these degrees in those countries. But the crux of the matter is that these schools, from the foundation, they are not even supposed to be in existence. They are unknown to these countries. So the foundation is faulty already, right from the beginning. So, and you can't build something on nothing. So that's why I align myself with the government position, and I support it 100%.
Right. I guess it's just collateral damage then at this point. But looking at how easy it is for this to happen across the border, whether it's Benin or Togo, for instance, what are your concerns about other African nations that Nigerians go to in search or in pursuit of their academic careers, for instance? I mean, we're limiting this conversation, or the scope of this investigation has been on Benin Republic and Togo, largely on Benin because that's where your reporting came from. But do you worry that there are other universities outside of these two countries that perhaps are practicing the same style?
Of course, we've been getting leads, we've been hearing information that this kind of practice is happening in some other countries as well. But since I've not investigated it yet, and none of my colleagues also in the journalism profession has done that, so we'll just leave it as we'll leave it at the realms of speculations at the moment until we're able to investigate it, or even the ministry on its own took it upon itself to maybe find out by themselves to see if these things are really happening over there. as it is being alleged.
Right.
But you know, that of Cotonou, Benin, for example, has become so rampant. We've done a similar investigation in the past, hoping that the thing will die down. But unfortunately, it keeps getting worse to the extent that before people travel there, and it got to a stage that you don't even need to travel. You just be at the comfort of your home and ordered for a degree certificate. So it was that bad.
And in talking about putting an end to it, do you think this over 20,000 certificates are all the certificates, perhaps, that are in this pool? Because, I mean, from 2018 to date, for example, you're talking about graduating hundreds of thousands of students who went to Benin Republic, or, as you said, who ordered their certificate online from Benin Republic. Do you think that we have all the fish in one net?
So, you know, I wasn't part of the team that went to Benin to get this data. The data is actually from the ministry, and the minister even said the numbers might even be more. So I don't know, but I think the ministry itself, even though I heard the minister said some staff in the ministry have faced disciplinary committee, so it also speaks to the rots in that ministry, because how comes these guys they were being graduated every year, they were issued accreditation letter and evaluation letter, so every year, and we have this high number. So I think the ministry need to do more to also sanitize its house. Although he mentioned it during the press conference, but they need to tell us more. What are the punitive measures? How comes we are able to get these numbers? Who were those that were issuing those letters of accreditation and sending it to the NYC to allow these guys to serve and also obtain NYC certificate? So we need more. We need there are more questions to answer from the ministry. That's what I think.
Speaking about those systemic gaps, Umar, seeing how easy it was for you to get the certificate and also get your call-up letter to serve for your NYC duty, what do you recommend the government needs to do to put all of these guardrails so that this, going forward, beyond just the punitive measure of invalidating people's certificate, this doesn't happen in the future?
Well, like I said, it's just for them to sanitize their own house, make sure that since already we now have the official list of schools that are recognized to offer degree programs, as we are told, only 5 have that meet the criteria to offer an undergraduate program. So we should start from there. There should be there should be communications between the government of Benin and the Nigerian government. And we should make sure that this kind of lapses that we've seen in the past never happened again. But as I am saying it, this minister is someone who is highly principled and have zero tolerance for indiscipline. So I hope that sanity that he said he has started will be sustained, so that at the end of the day, we don't go back after this announcement. Then after a year or two, we see this kind of issues coming up again. And also, you know, the policy was also an announcement. He said the SGF and the office of the head of service have been directed to issue circulars to this effect. So up to now, it is not yet Uhuru until these circulars are issued and we see that it is being implemented by the various MDAs and ministries. So until then, we'll just keep our eyes and be following whatever is coming out from that ministry.
Well, you talk about impact, Umar. It's obvious that this particular piece of reporting has done a lot of good to not only put the spotlight on this rot within the system, but to also see the Nigerian government take action to help stop the bleeding and redirect the education system towards the right course. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. And also, once again, thank you for the good reporting. Appreciate you for joining us on Daily Politics.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Umar Audu, the investigative journalist that set the ball in motion for this development to happen, to unravel in the manner that it has. In talking about, Dr. Bindir, widening the scope, right? A lot of people have over the years talked about how government has been reactionary, and this is one of those instances where we are reacting to a development. It's time now to be proactive. Even though internally we have so many issues, ASU would tell you that the reason why people are going to Benin Republic is because things are bad here at home. Let me get your take on how we can sanitize the system from within and also guarantee sustainable systems going forward.
Well, I think as far as institutions and systems are concerned, we have the institutions. But you know, institutions are driven by people. What the Honorable Minister did in a very transparent and strong manner to send a message into the system is that those easy openings and watery things should be over by now. And I think if care is not taken, even officers within the ministries and the institutions will be named now as accomplices of actually trying to push
Isn't
this.
that one of the things that's missing from this whole debacle? No heads are rolling, whether it's at the NYSC or the Ministry of Education or at the Universities Commission, that nobody is paying the price for allowing this to happen over the years?
Well, I think the story is still fresh. It's just some few days when the Honorable Minister came with this. If you had started with identifying students, identifying institutions, identifying countries, sanctioning and so on, probably like a bulldozer, if you're bulldozing everything, you can stall. You know, the system can just collapse. So, but I think he has a roadmap. I think he's systematic. First, bring the whole thing to the country and internationally that Nigeria is not going to continue with this porosity again. Please, let everybody know that. Secondly, if you think we're saying just porosity, this is the evidence. We have numbers of students that have gone to these universities in these countries and they are not qualified. And if you still ask more questions, these investigative journalists have gone through the practice and reported, and it is on that basis. So I don't think that's the end of the story yet. I think the momentum is going to snowball more. We will see even the process of implementation of this. You know, there are people who might want to hide their brothers and sisters or whatever, you know, and try to buy time. I think the minister has a plan for that as well. So as far as I'm concerned, I think the momentum is going to build up, and I think gradually his objective is to sanitize the system totally. And there's nothing anyone can say. If you wish Nigeria well, then to wish the minister the very best.
What do you say to people who say, like the adage, charity begins at home? We should start by purging the inadequacies of the system, start by funding our universities more, our lecturers need to be paid more, our universities need better facilities, and then we wouldn't have to worry about Nigerians going to Benin Republic or Togo or any of these perceived lesser countries in search of better education.
I think you're right. I mean, again, I guess as part of this package, that sanitization process of trying to open up universities, improve the quality of education in our country, fund the public institutions, strengthen the private institutions, open up courses so that it can satisfy whatever career adventures young people want to take, and so on and so forth. Certainly, we've seen a calmer ASU now, you know, not striking unnecessarily. So we hope that too will be sustained so that universities, a 3-year course is 3-year course, a 4-year course is 4-year course, a 5-year course, you know, so that people don't have this urge or interest to break the law just because our system is actually limping. So I think the Honorable Minister is sieving most of these inadequacies of the past, and he's addressing them one after the other. And my hope is that gradually his policies will strengthen, and our system possibly in the next few years will be very sharper. And
in talking about the over 20,000 certificates that have been named, give me your understanding of what comes next, because it is one thing to say over 20,000 certificates have been invalidated. It's another thing to come up with a list of the names of the persons that hold those certificates, whether they're in the civil service or working in the private sector. What do you think the approach would be going forward to identify
the beneficiaries of this?
Yeah, exactly. The holders of these quote-unquote substandard certificates.
I think it's easier with the public service. In the public service, particularly the federal the public, civil and public service, is easier that way because the head of the civil service directly is sitting there when these policies have been approved at the Federal Executive Council. The next is to expand it to the public service of the subnationals in the states to see that normally the head of the civil service of the federation has a meeting with all the heads of civil service of the states. And you know, they have like literally their council. And I think that will radiate down to that level and be able to get cooperation with the states. And so the public system is easier because you have nominal roles. Most of the states have adopted the EPIS payment system. We have all the biometrics of workers in one place. And so it's easier with the public. But with the private sector, possibly that fake certificate, because the chap, you know, is bending down, is learning from the system and is very hardworking, possibly the private sector will say, well, yes, his certificate might be bad, but he's a good worker, so we want to keep him. You remember the DG of the Automotive Council, Jelani Aliu, he actually said all the fantastic work that he's been doing all over the world, no one has ever asked him of his certificate. It's only when he came to Nigeria that we asked him of his certificate to rank him as educated at this level and so on and so on. So private sector is a little bit more difficult, but public sector, I think, is easier. Even within the public sector, it is easier with the federal public system. And then we gradually will delve into the subnational.
So, for instance, in the public sector, in the civil service, you identify some 10,000, 20,000, whatever the amount is. What comes next? Termination of the employment, and where does that fall in our labor laws?
Well, this is what the directive is. The Honorable Minister was very, very clear on his press encounter that these are fake certificates to start with, and all the employees using these fake certificates will be fished out and literally be relieved of their appointments, period. So I'm sure they have a list. Mentioning 20,000 certificates. Certificate is not an empty blank piece of paper. So they must have a list, names and everything. The next is to line up these names, you know, and the details they have to the nominal roles, you know, and EPIS can very, very quickly help you at the federal level, at least I know. And in a week, you can identify all these fake certificates.
Yeah, but don't you see the complication there? For instance, someone gets into the service with a diploma and decided to further his education and went to one of these universities that has now been banned and got this degree, and now he's been promoted because he has a degree. I mean, you take away that degree, what comes next? Do you demote him? Don't you see that further complicating the system? It
may look complicated, but when any house that has a very bad foundation, it's not a very strong house, it's good for demolishing. You can ask His Excellency Minister Wike if you want, you know. So if he has used the foundation of that fake certificate, I think the whole thing should just collapse, as far as I'm concerned. But if he abandons that fake certificate, goes back to the university, and then with the requirement of the university, goes through the first...
Can we just establish, Doctor, are we talking about substandard or fake? Because there are two different things.
Well, fake and substandard, I think...
Fake could be forged. Yeah. Substandard could be subpar, something that is not up to the standard that this country is willing to accept.
Yes.
Which doesn't make it fake. It makes it substandard.
Both are not acceptable in Nigeria. Both. If it's fake, I just sat in a room, got some kind of... somebody designed a certificate and put my name and everything.
Was there any point in time in your career, in your experience in government, especially in the academia, was there a point in time that we have a threshold, a standard to say certain degrees that come from elsewhere have to meet this particular threshold? Was there ever something like that?
Well, I think what I know is that you go to secondary school. During our time, there wasn't all this GCSE, whatever, it was WAEC. You go to WAEC, and entry into any public university in Nigeria has a credit level, 3 credits, 4 credits, 5 credits. Then when you enter normally at the preliminary level, either remedial or A levels or whatever. Qualifying now to start your course, you know, if you are to study history, at least you must pass history very, very well. If you are to study medicine, biology, physics, mathematics, and so on. So there is a process for you to actually get until you graduate. If that process is actually invalidated, in Nigerian universities, there's no way you can do that. There's no way you can enter a university in Nigeria, recognized and accredited university, without any credit. That doesn't happen, you know. Now, there may be marginal things. You have 3 credits, and then there are weak credits and so on. You might be tested again, you know, by being admitted into a remedial studies or whatever. But for you to now sit in a house, design a certificate, you know, really very good, well-faked certificate to get in, that's a crime. Like I said before, such certificates, there should be additional sanctions on that. Then the next is you go to a fake institution. It says it's a university with these facilities when it doesn't have the facility. It's one person sitting there, he's claiming to be the vice chancellor, he has only 2 lecturers, they claim they have all these courses, they pump you up with a lot of material, you read, and then you pass. That is a substandard university by Nigerian standard. That certificate should not be acceptable, and so on and so forth. So I'm sure within the 20,000 certificates, it's a mixture of so many things, but that does not qualify any out of that block to be a genuine and applicable certificate in the Nigerian system.
Against the backdrop of Umar's breaking story, when it broke earlier this year, there was a conversation around degree mills even in here in Nigeria, for instance, and the NUC has listed some 58 of them operating in Nigeria. The minister's position was not particularly clear about people holding certificates from this particular university, which begs the question, why are we cherry picking who to punish in this particular regard? Because 58 of them are still operational in Nigeria to the best of our knowledge so far. So why is this whole situation not holistic to say we're addressing all institutions that have churned out substandard degrees?
Well, you know, like I said, I'm sure you're reading the NUC website and you will see those institutions, 50 or 60, that are not recognized or accredited by NUC. The warning you will see that on that heading is that these universities are not recognized by NUC, and therefore getting qualifications from these universities might lead you to enter this list, period. Now, it's up to you. If you now go and you pay money and then they open the door very easily for you to get a certificate, you might scale through, like some of these people have scaled through, get a job.
Okay. The 58 are privately run institutions, some of them with their main campuses on the international scene, whether it's Europe or America or in other parts of the world. But 8 Nigerian universities have also been fingered. The National University of Nigeria in Kefi, the North Central University Otukpo in Benue State, and a variety of other, you know, Nigerian-run universities that, according to the NUC, are running degree programs or issuing degrees illegally. Do you fear that this particular step, although in the right direction, might not be conclusive in addressing this rot?
It's certainly not conclusive. Aiming at Togo and Benin universities, I think, is chapter 1. There will be chapter 2. I mean, it's not like new, because the NUC has always warned people, but to go to the extent of saying, if you have certificates from these institutions, which we think is, we have termed fake or substandard, and you've gone ahead to do NYC to go and get a job, we're going to fish you for relying on this bad foundation to take advantage of Nigeria, and you will be kicked out, sacked. I don't know whether there will be additional sanction on that.
You don't think the people with those certificates deserve some kind of compensation, say for instance an automatic admission into the university, so they can get their lives back together again?
No, I don't think they. If you see, the challenges with mistakes and criminal activities is that.
You think this is criminal?
Of course. If you go, this is a fake university, you go in there, you collect a certificate, substandard certificate, you quietly come into a country that has a standard, you go through the NYSC, a standard practice, and then you go through the interviews to get a job, standard practice. Of course, it's a crime.
Okay.
This is theft.
I think when they were doing it, it wasn't a crime, but perhaps going forward, it makes it punishable, especially given where we are right now. Unfortunately, we're going to have to anchor the conversation here, but as you reckon, this is a developing story, and we would, of course, keep tabs on this and many other developments. Dr. Bindir, as always, thank you most kindly for joining the conversation. Appreciate you for your expert insight.
Thank you very much. And once again, I congratulate the Honorable Minister for this progress.
All right. This is where we're going to have to anchor the discussion and the show for tonight. Thank you most kindly for joining us. Feel free to be a part of our next edition. It will be coming to you tomorrow live at 8 p.m. on Trust TV. My name is Abdullahi Ahmed. Do well to follow us across our social media platforms to stay in touch. Also visit our website, trusttv.com, for more. Good evening.